Student hands a note to the new teacher, without knowing he was the principal in disguise. Tommy's small hands trembled as he approached the new teacher's desk, clutching a crumpled envelope to his chest. The 9-year-old had spent all night debating whether to deliver that note, knowing it was his only hope to save the most important person in his life. The man in the beige sweater and jeans, who had introduced himself as substitute teacher Michael Parker, was sorting through papers when he noticed the boy standing there, clearly nervous. What Tommy didn't know was that this man was actually Robert Williams, principal of a top-rated public school in Chicago, who had taken on a false identity to investigate serious allegations of misconduct at Lincoln Elementary School in the Hopeville neighborhood. "Teacher, do you have a minute?" Tommy asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Robert, maintaining his disguise, smiled kindly. There was something in the boy's eyes that moved him deeply, a mix of desperation and hope he recognized well from his years in education. "Of course, Tommy. What do you need?" The boy glanced around, making sure no one was watching. It was recess, and most of his classmates were outside. Carefully, he held out the crumpled envelope. "This is for you, but promise you won't tell anyone I wrote it?" Robert took the envelope, noticing how the boy's hands were dirty and bruised, with small cuts that looked like they came from manual labor. That wasn't normal for a 9-year-old. "You can trust me, Tommy." The boy nodded and hurried out of the room, leaving Robert alone with the note. When he opened the envelope, he found a sheet of notebook paper with childlike but careful handwriting. "Teacher, please help me. My grandma Margaret has worked cleaning here at school for 30 years. She's always been the best worker, but now Principal Karen wants to fire her to give the job to her niece. My grandma cries every night because she has no other job, and she's raised me alone since my dad left. The principal is making up lies about my grandma to have an excuse to fire her. I don't know what to do anymore. If she loses her job, we won't even have money for food. Please, if you can help in any way." The note ended abruptly, as if Tommy had lost the courage to go on. Robert's heart raced. Those few lines confirmed exactly what he had come to investigate. Over the past weeks, he had received anonymous complaints about corruption at the school, favoritism, and mistreatment of longtime staff. He tucked the note into his pocket and decided to watch more closely what was happening in the school's halls. During recess, Robert stepped outside and soon spotted a gray-haired woman scrubbing the windows with obsessive intensity. Even from a distance, he could see she worked with near-desperate dedication, as if trying to prove something. That must be Margaret, Tommy's grandmother. "Margaret, you still haven't finished that window?" A shrill voice echoed across the yard. A blonde woman in her 40s, wearing a red pantsuit and high heels, strode forward with purpose. Robert immediately recognized Karen Mitchell, the academic principal named in the complaints. "I'm sorry, Principal Karen. I'm doing my best," Margaret replied, lowering her head. "Your best? Margaret, your hands aren't as steady as they used to be. Maybe it's time to think about a well-earned rest, don't you think?" Robert watched the scene, noticing how other staff members quickly moved away as Karen approached. The principal spoke softly, but her tone was clearly threatening. "I can still do my job well, Principal. I really need this job." "Well, we'll see. Today, I'll be doing a full evaluation of your work. And you know any slip-up could be grounds for changes." Margaret swallowed hard and went back to cleaning the windows with even more intensity. Robert noticed the older woman's trembling hands, not from incompetence, but from nerves and fear. When Karen walked away, he casually approached Margaret. "Good afternoon, I'm the new substitute teacher, Michael Parker." She greeted him timidly, but Robert noticed a special spark in her eyes when she said, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Parker. Have you met my grandson Tommy? He's in your class." "Yes, I have. He's a very special boy." Margaret's face lit up with a genuine smile, the first Robert had seen from her that day. "Tommy is my whole world, Mr. Parker. Studious, polite, always thinking of others. Ever since he was little, he's helped me with everything. Sometimes I think he grew up too fast because of our struggles." "Struggles?" Margaret hesitated, as if about to say something important. But at that moment, Karen reappeared in the hallway. "Margaret, stop chatting during work hours. Mr. Parker, shouldn't you be preparing for your next class?" "You're right, Principal. I was just leaving," Robert replied, masking his irritation. Later, at the end of the day, Robert decided to discreetly follow Tommy. The boy left the school and walked down narrow streets until he reached a small light blue wooden house with a backyard where some vegetables grew. Hidden behind a tree, Robert saw Margaret arriving home a few minutes later, walking slowly and carrying a grocery bag. Tommy ran to hug her. "Grandma, how was work today?" "It was fine, sweetheart. Don't worry about these things." But Robert could see she was hiding a paper behind her back, likely a warning or some work-related document. That night in his apartment, Robert called his assistant at the school board where he actually worked. "Jennifer, I need you to send me everything we have on irregularities in municipal hiring, especially cases of nepotism." "Anything specific, Robert? I'm looking into a case that might be much more serious than we thought." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers out. Now back to the story. The next day, Robert arrived at school early and decided to examine the administrative files. As a substitute teacher, he shouldn't have had access to those documents, but his years of experience in school management gave him the skills to find what he needed. What he discovered shocked him. Over the past 2 years, 5 long-time employees had been let go, all following the same pattern. First, a series of warnings for made-up issues. Then the hiring of people connected to Principal Karen to fill the vacancies. Even more disturbing, Karen's niece, Melissa Mitchell, had been hired as an administrative assistant just 6 months ago, despite failing the civil service exam. Her name appeared in the documents as a special appointment due to urgent need. "Mr. Parker, what are you doing here so early?" Robert turned and found Mrs. Dorothy, the school secretary, a woman in her 60s who had worked there for decades. "Good morning, Mrs. Dorothy. Just organizing some activities for the students." She studied him with a piercing gaze, as if seeing through his disguise. "Mr. Parker, may I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "Are you really just a substitute teacher?" Robert hesitated. There was something in Mrs. Dorothy's tone that suggested she knew more than she let on. "Why do you ask?" "Because in 40 years of working in schools, I've never seen a substitute teacher take such an interest in administrative files. And also," she lowered her voice, "because someone needs to do something to save people like Margaret." Sensing he might have found an ally, Robert decided to test the waters. "Mrs. Dorothy, what exactly is happening to the long-time staff at this school?" The secretary looked around, making sure they were alone. "Professor, if I tell you what I know, do you promise you'll do something about it?" "I promise." "Karen is cleaning house, getting rid of all the long-time staff to replace them with her family and friends. Margaret is just next on the list. She's already gotten her niece, her brother-in-law as the janitor, and her goddaughter as the cook. None of them went through the proper hiring process, and they're all being paid more than they should." "And no one has ever reported this?" "Who would dare? Everyone's afraid of losing their jobs, and Karen has connections high up. The education commissioner himself has been friends with her since college." Robert nodded gravely. The situation was even worse than he'd imagined. "Mrs. Dorothy, I need your help. Margaret can't be wronged like this. What do you want me to do?" "Show me all the documents related to dismissals over the last 2 years, and I also want to see the contracts for all of Karen's relatives who were hired." Mrs. Dorothy hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "All right, but this stays between us." During recess, Robert noticed Tommy sitting alone under a tree in the yard, eating a simple sandwich of bread and margarine. He approached carefully. "Tommy, mind if I sit here?" The boy nodded, but Robert could tell he was quieter than usual. "Everything okay today?" Tommy hesitated before answering. "Professor, have you ever been afraid of losing someone really important?" The depth of the question caught Robert off guard. "Yes, Tommy, why?" "It's just, sometimes I'm scared my grandma might disappear from my life. She's all I have." "Your grandmother loves you very much. Anyone can see that." "I know. But what if it's not enough?" What if she can't work anymore and we have to split up? Robert felt a pang in his chest. This boy carried worries no child should have. Tommy, I want you to know there are people who care about both of you. And sometimes when we do the right thing, things work out in ways we don't expect. The boy looked at him with a mix of hope and skepticism. You really think so? I believe it. Just then, Karen walked past them and made sure to speak loudly enough for Tommy to hear. Margaret, I'll need to speak with you after your shift. We have some administrative matters to settle. Robert saw the color drain from Tommy's face. The boy knew exactly what that meant. After classes, Robert decided to wait in hiding to witness the conversation between Karen and Margaret. He positioned himself where he could hear without being seen. Margaret, I'm sorry, but I have to inform you that your position here is becoming untenable. What do you mean, Principal? Well, over the past few weeks, I've received several complaints about the quality of your work. Poorly cleaned windows, improperly sanitized restrooms, tardiness. But Principal, I've never been late a single day in 30 years of work. Margaret, I know it's hard to accept, but age comes for us all. Maybe it's best you consider a dignified retirement while you still have the option. And my grandson, how will I support him? That's not the school's responsibility, Margaret. We have to think of what's best for the institution. Robert had to restrain himself from stepping in right then. Margaret fought back tears, trying to maintain her dignity. Principal, I beg you, give me one more chance. I can improve. I can work harder. Margaret, the decision is already made. I'll give you 2 weeks to find another job. After that, I'll have to formalize your termination. When Margaret left that room, she was visibly shaken. Robert followed her discreetly and saw her hide behind the school building to cry. Tommy was waiting for her at the gate and ran to her as soon as he saw her. Grandma, what happened? Why are you crying? It's nothing, sweetheart. Grandma's just a little tired today. Did the principal say something mean to you? Margaret hesitated, clearly trying to shield her grandson from a painful truth. Tommy, maybe it's time for us to think about changes. What kind of changes? Grandma might need to look for another job. Tommy fell silent for a long moment. Then, with surprising determination for a child, he said, Grandma, you're not losing this job. I won't let it happen. Tommy, my love, sometimes things don't depend just on what we want, but they depend on doing what's right, and someone has to do what's right. Robert, watching from a distance, felt deep admiration for that boy. Tommy was only 9, but he had a sense of justice and courage that many adults lacked. That night at home, Robert spent hours studying all the documents Mrs. Dorothy had given him. Karen's scheme was even more elaborate than he'd imagined. She wasn't just hiring relatives, she was also diverting school lunch funds and selling textbooks that should have been free. He called his assistant again. Jennifer, I need you to contact the district attorney's office. We have enough evidence for a formal investigation. Robert, are you sure? An accusation like this could have serious consequences. I'm sure. And the sooner we act, the fewer people will get hurt. The next day, Robert arrived at school determined to intensify his investigation. During morning recess, he noticed something that caught his attention. Tommy was helping his grandmother carry buckets of water. Tommy, shouldn't you be at recess with the other boys? I'm helping my grandma, Mr. Williams. Her back hurts today. Margaret tried to protest. Tommy, you don't need to worry about this. Go play with your friends. Grandma, we're family. Family helps each other. Robert watched the interaction with a mix of admiration and sadness. That boy was losing his childhood to care for his grandmother, and the woman was pushing herself beyond her limits to keep her job. Margaret, if I may ask, are you in pain? It's nothing serious, Mr. Williams. Just a little tired. But Robert could see she was clearly suffering. Her hands trembled as she held the cleaning supplies, and she paused frequently to catch her breath. Grandma, you should see a doctor, Tommy whispered, worried. We don't have money for doctors, sweetheart. And besides, if I miss work now... She didn't need to finish. Everyone understood what she meant. At that moment, Karen appeared in the hallway. Margaret, I see you're involving your grandson in work activities. That's highly inappropriate. A child shouldn't be handling cleaning supplies in school. Principal, he was just helping me. There's no excuse, Margaret. This will go in your report. Tommy looked at Karen with an expression Robert had never seen on a child, a mix of anger, disappointment, and determination. "Ma'am, my grandma didn't do anything wrong." "Tommy!" Margaret tried to quiet him, clearly frightened. "Boy, you shouldn't be meddling in grown-up matters," said Karen in a condescending tone. "Grown-up matters? You're being unfair to my grandma, and that hurts me a lot." Robert was impressed by the boy's courage, but also worried about the possible consequences. "Tommy, I think you should go back to class," he gently intervened. The boy looked at him as if he wanted to say more, but nodded and walked away. Margaret watched him go, clearly both proud and concerned. "Mr. Michael, I expect you to talk to that boy about respecting authority," Karen said before leaving. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out." Now, continuing. After the incident, Robert decided it was time to act more directly. During lunch, when the school was emptier, he headed to Karen's office. The door was slightly ajar, and he overheard a phone conversation. "Yes, she'll be let go next week. Then you can have your daughter bring the documents." "No, there won't be an open hiring process. You know how it works." Robert discreetly turned on his phone's recorder. This was the evidence he needed. "The important thing is that she knows to stay quiet and not ask questions. The other staff have already learned not to interfere. Yes, she'll earn the same as Margaret did, but she'll work half as much." When Karen hung up, Robert quickly stepped away. He now had concrete proof of the corruption scheme. Later during class, he noticed Tommy was unusually distracted. The boy kept looking out the window where he could see his grandmother working in the yard. "Tommy, is everything okay?" "Mr. Williams, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why do some bad people get to hurt good people?" The question echoed in the silent classroom. Other children looked up, interested in the answer. "That's a very deep question, Tommy. Sometimes it happens because good people are afraid to stand up for themselves, or because they think they don't have the power to change things. But if all the good people come together, can they be stronger than the bad ones?" "Usually, yes. The hard part is making good people realize they're not alone." Tommy nodded thoughtfully, as if processing some plan. At the end of the day, Robert saw Margaret leaving the school, visibly exhausted. She walked with difficulty, clearly overwhelmed. Tommy waited for her at the gate with a worried expression. "Grandma, you look really tired today." "I'm fine, sweetheart. I just need a good night's sleep." "Grandma, I've been thinking, maybe we should tell someone about what's happening here at school." "Tommy, we can't risk trouble. We have nowhere to go if I lose this job." "But Grandma, if we don't do anything, you'll lose it anyway. At least if we try, we have a chance." Margaret stopped walking and looked at her grandson in surprise. Sometimes she forgot how mature he was for his age. "What do you suggest, my angel?" "Trust Mr. Michael. He seems different from the others. He really cares." Margaret hesitated. In her 30 years at the school, she'd learned not to easily trust authority figures. "Tommy, teachers come and go. Our situation is more complicated than anyone can understand. But Grandma, sometimes we have to believe there are good people in the world. Otherwise, how do we keep trying?" That remark struck Margaret deeply. Her grandson, despite facing so many hardships, still held on to hope and faith in human kindness. That night, Robert worked late, compiling a full dossier on the school's misconduct. There were recordings, documents, testimonies, and enough evidence not only to remove Karen from her position, but also to criminally prosecute her for corruption and abuse of power. He called the district attorney responsible for education in the region. "District Attorney Johnson, this is Robert Williams, principal of Washington High School. I have information about a serious case of corruption that requires immediate intervention. What's the nature of the irregularities? Systematic nepotism, misuse of public funds, harassment of employees, and several other violations. I can send the evidence today." "Robert, you understand that accusations of this nature require a formal investigation. If proven true, it will result in intervention at the school." "I understand perfectly, and I know some innocent people may be harmed during the process. That's why I need to act quickly to protect them. Send everything you have. I'll review it and initiate the procedures." After sending the documents, Robert stayed awake thinking about Tommy and Margaret. He knew the next few days would be chaotic, and he wanted to make sure they wouldn't face retaliation. The next morning, he arrived at school determined to speak directly with Tommy. He found the boy organizing the classroom desks before lessons began. "Tommy, can I talk to you for a moment?" "Of course, Mr. Williams. I want you to know I read your note very carefully, and I want you to understand that when someone has the courage to ask for help, that help should come." Tommy's eyes lit up. "Are you going to help my grandma?" "I'll do everything in my power, but I need you to trust me, even if things get a little confusing in the next few days." "Confusing how?" "Sometimes, to fix a bad situation, you have to change a lot of things at once, and that can make everyone nervous." Tommy nodded seriously, showing impressive maturity. "Mr. Williams, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course. I knew you were different from the first day. The way you look at people, it's like you really see them." Robert was touched by the observation. "And you, Tommy, see people in a special way too. That's a very rare gift." During recess, Robert noticed unusual activity at the school. Mrs. Dorothy seemed nervous, and some staff were whispering among themselves. He approached the secretary. "Mrs. Dorothy, did something happen?" "Mr. Williams, I think someone filed a complaint about the school. Karen is furious and wants to find out who did it." Robert's heart raced. The process was starting faster than he expected. "How does she know?" "She got a call from the Department of Education asking her to prepare some urgent documents. They also mentioned there might be a surprise inspection at any moment." Robert knew he had to act quickly to protect those who might face retaliation. "Mrs. Dorothy, it's important you don't show any nervousness, and if anyone asks about conversations with me, just say we discussed teaching matters." "Mr. Williams, are you sure about what you're doing?" "Absolutely sure." At that moment, they saw Karen storming out of her office with a furious expression. She looked straight at Robert and approached. "Mr. Parker, I need to speak with you." "Of course, Principal." "Come to my office, please." Robert followed her, keeping his composure despite the tension inside. "Mr. Parker, I've been hearing some comments about your integration into the school staff." "What kind of comments?" "It seems you've been asking a lot of questions about administrative matters. That's a bit unusual for a substitute teacher." "Principal, I've always been someone interested in understanding how the institutions I work in operate." "I see. But I want to make it clear that administrative matters are the sole responsibility of the principal. Teachers should focus on their academic activities." "Of course." "Great. And since we're talking, I should inform you that some long-time school employees are undergoing performance reviews. It's a standard renewal process." Robert understood the hidden message. Karen was warning that she wouldn't hesitate to harm innocent people if she felt threatened. "I see. I hope it's a fair process for everyone involved." "Oh, it will be. Very fair." When he left Karen's office, Robert was convinced she suspected something. He needed to speed up his investigation while also increasing protection for Margaret and Tommy. During the afternoon class, he noticed Tommy was even quieter than usual. The boy kept glancing out the window where his grandmother could be seen cleaning with almost desperate intensity. "Tommy, would you like to share what you're writing?" The boy hesitated, but then held up a sheet of paper. "It's an essay about brave people, Mr. Williams. Would you read it to the class?" Tommy stood and began. "Bravery isn't about not being afraid. Bravery is doing the right thing even when you are scared. My grandma is the bravest person I know because she works every day to take care of me, even when she's tired and even when bad people try to hurt her. She taught me that we should never give up fighting for what's right, even when it seems hopeless." The room fell silent. Some children looked moved, others confused. Robert felt a lump in his throat. "Well done, Tommy. That's a very profound reflection on bravery." When classes ended, Robert saw Margaret waiting for Tommy at the gate. She looked exhausted and worried. "Grandma, how was your day?" "It was hard, sweetheart. The principal is making me redo work that was already finished. Said it wasn't up to standard." "But Grandma, you've always done the job the same way for 30 years. "I know, Tommy, but sometimes rules change." Robert approached discreetly. "Margaret, may I speak with you for a moment? She looked at him with surprise and a little apprehension. Of course, Mr. Williams. I want you to know that Tommy is an exceptional student, and a child can only be that way when raised by someone very special. Margaret smiled timidly, but Robert noticed tears in her eyes. Mr. Williams, sometimes I wonder if I'm raising him right, if I'm failing him somehow. Margaret, from what I see every day, you're raising a boy who will grow into an honest and compassionate man. That's the greatest achievement anyone can have. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Those words mean a lot to me, and I want you to know that, no matter what happens in the coming days, there are people who recognize your worth and dedication. Margaret looked at him questioningly, as if trying to understand exactly what he meant. That night, Robert received a call from the district attorney. Robert, we've reviewed the material you sent. It's very serious. We'll begin a formal investigation tomorrow. District Attorney Johnson, there's an employee who needs special protection. She's one of the key witnesses and the next target in this scheme. Who is it? Margaret Wilson Jenkins, a custodian for 30 years. She's being pushed out to make room for the principal's niece. We'll add her to the protected list during the investigation. And Robert, you must maintain your cover until the investigation concludes. Your undercover position is crucial for gathering all the evidence. Understood. One more thing, we'll need testimony from the boy who wrote the note. Tommy, right? Yes, but he's just a child. I don't want him to be traumatized by this process. I understand your concern. We'll handle everything very carefully. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot since we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The next morning, Robert arrived at school and immediately noticed a different tension in the air. Mrs. Dorothy was visibly nervous, and two men in suits were talking to Karen in her office. Tommy arrived a few minutes late, which was very unusual for him. Sorry, Mr. Williams, my grandma wasn't feeling well this morning. What happened? She was worried all night, said she had a bad feeling about today. Robert felt a pang of guilt. He knew the investigation would begin that day, and that things would get tense for all the staff. During recess, he saw Margaret cleaning the hallways slower than usual. She kept stopping and glancing toward the principal's office, where the movement of people in suits had caught everyone's attention. Margaret, is everything okay? Mr. Williams, do you know what's going on? There are strange people in the school today. They're probably just routine inspectors from the Department of Education. Margaret didn't seem convinced but nodded. Robert noticed her hands were shaking more than usual. Around 10 in the morning, a group of 6 people arrived at the school. 2 district attorneys, 2 auditors from the Department of Education, and 2 investigators. Karen greeted them at the entrance with a forced smile. The news spread quickly among staff and students. Robert saw Tommy looking out the classroom window, clearly worried. Mr. Williams, is my grandma going to be okay? Tommy, you have to trust that sometimes things happen for a bigger reason, and that good people have good people looking out for them. The boy nodded, but Robert could see the anxiety in his eyes. At lunchtime, the situation escalated. Karen was called in to give a statement, and several staff members were summoned for questioning. Margaret was on the list. Robert watched as she was called into the meeting room. The poor woman walked in with trembling hands and a look of terror on her face. Outside, Tommy waited anxiously, even though it was class time. Robert approached him. Tommy, your grandma is just answering some questions about how the school runs. There's nothing wrong. Mr. Williams, I'm scared. Scared of what? That we'll be separated. That I'll have to go somewhere far from my grandma. Robert knelt to meet the boy's eye level. Tommy, I want you to promise me something. What promise? Promise that no matter what happens today, you'll trust that there are people fighting to protect you and your grandma. I promise. But Mr. Williams, yes? You're one of those people, aren't you? Robert hesitated for a moment. He'd been keeping a false identity for weeks, but right then, he felt he owed Tommy the truth. Yes, Tommy, I am one of those people. The boy smiled for the first time that day. I knew it. From the first day, I knew. 2 hours later, Margaret came out of the meeting room. She looked confused, but no longer terrified. One of the district attorneys walked her to the door and said something Robert couldn't hear, but it clearly reassured her. Tommy ran to his grandma. "Grandma, how was it?" "It was strange, sweetheart. They asked a lot of questions about how I work here, about Principal Karen, about other people who were let go." "And what did you say?" "The truth, Tommy. I always told the truth." Robert approached quietly. "Margaret, how are you feeling?" "Mr. Williams, I think something very big is happening here. And as incredible as it may seem, I have a feeling this might be something good." "Why do you say that?" "Because for the first time in a long while, someone truly listened to me. Someone actually wanted to know what I really thought about what's happening at this school." Late in the afternoon, as the investigators were preparing to leave, one of them approached Robert. "Mr. Michael?" "Yes?" "Or rather, Principal Robert Williams." The man spoke quietly enough that only Robert could hear. "District Attorney Johnson would like to speak with you. Can we set it up for tonight?" "Of course. And Principal, the undercover work you did here was exceptional. We have enough evidence not just to remove the principal, but for a full criminal case." Robert nodded, feeling a mix of relief and concern about the next steps. As he was leaving the school, he saw Tommy and Margaret walking home together. The boy was holding his grandmother's hand and seemed to be telling her something that made her smile. That night, Robert met with District Attorney Johnson in his office. "Robert, what we uncovered today exceeded our expectations. Karen wasn't just practicing nepotism, she was also embezzling lunch funds, selling school supplies, and extorting staff. What happens now? Tomorrow, she'll be removed from her position and face criminal charges. We'll appoint a temporary supervisor while we arrange a new hiring process through public competition. What about the staff who were wronged? Everyone will be compensated. Those who were unfairly dismissed will be reinstated, and we'll review all irregular hires. And Margaret? Margaret won't just keep her job, she'll receive compensation for the mistreatment she endured. And there's more. We're considering promoting her to General Services Coordinator in recognition of her 30 years of dedication." Robert felt a wave of joy and relief. "District Attorney Johnson, when can I reveal my true identity?" "Tomorrow, after Karen's arrest. But Robert, I have to tell you, the boy Tommy has become a symbol for our team. His courage in writing that note didn't just save his grandmother, it saved the entire school community. He really is special. That's why we want to offer him a full scholarship, from elementary school all the way through college. A boy with that kind of bravery and sense of justice deserves every opportunity." The next morning, Robert arrived at school knowing it would be a transformative day. Tommy noticed something different in his demeanor. "Mr. Williams, you seem different today." "Why do you say that?" "I can't explain it. It's like you're more yourself." At 9 o'clock, 2 police cars pulled up to the school. Karen was arrested in her own office in front of several staff members. The scene caused a stir among students and teachers. Margaret, who had been cleaning the nearby hallway, stopped working and watched in disbelief. Tommy, who had left his classroom when he heard the commotion, ran to his grandmother. "Grandma, what's happening?" "I don't know, sweetheart. I think Principal Karen did something very wrong." District Attorney Johnson stepped into the school courtyard and asked all staff to gather. Robert knew it was time to reveal the truth. "Dear colleagues," the district attorney began, "I'm here to inform you that after a thorough investigation, we've uncovered serious misconduct in this school's administration. Principal Karen Mitchell has been removed and will face criminal charges for her actions." A murmur spread through the crowd. "Furthermore, I'd like to introduce someone who was instrumental in bringing justice. Mr. Michael Parker is actually Principal Robert Williams from Washington High School, who went undercover here to investigate the reports we received." Margaret brought her hand to her mouth, completely shocked. Tommy stared at Robert with wide eyes. "Principal Williams," District Attorney Johnson continued, "would you like to say a few words?" Robert walked to the center of the courtyard. Every eye was fixed on him, but the only ones that truly mattered were Tommy's and Margaret's. "I want to start by apologizing for keeping my identity a secret. I know some of you may feel deceived, but it was necessary to protect the investigation and, most importantly, to protect the people who could face retaliation. He looked directly at Tommy. A few weeks ago, a very brave boy handed me a note asking for help for his grandmother. That note not only revealed the extraordinary courage of a child, but also gave us the clues we needed to uncover a corruption scheme that was harming the entire school community. Tommy hid behind his grandmother, clearly embarrassed by the attention. Margaret Wilson Jenkins, Robert continued, you are an example of dedication and honesty. For 30 years, you've worked with dignity and always put the well-being of the students above all else. That's why it's my honor to inform you that you've been promoted to General Services Coordinator of this school, with all the rights and benefits the position offers. Margaret began to cry. Tommy hugged her, also emotional. Additionally, District Attorney Johnson added, Tommy Jenkins Wilson has received a full scholarship that will cover his entire education from elementary school through college. The courtyard erupted in applause. Mrs. Dorothy was one of the first to approach and embrace Margaret. Margaret, you deserve this and so much more, the secretary said, tears in her eyes. When the crowd dispersed, Tommy timidly approached Robert. Principal Williams? Yes, Tommy? You lied to me. Robert's heart tightened. You lied about your name and who you were. That's true, Tommy, and I'm sorry for that. The boy fell silent for a moment, as if deep in thought. But you didn't lie about what mattered. How so? You said you'd help me. You said you'd protect my grandma. You said there were good people fighting for us, that was all true. Robert knelt to be at the boy's eye level. Tommy, you have a wisdom many adults don't, and I want you to know that everything that happened here started with your courage to ask for help. Principal Williams, can I tell you another secret? Of course. When I gave you that note, I knew you weren't just a regular teacher. There was something different in the way you looked at me, like you really saw me. And what did you see in me? I saw someone who truly cared, someone who wouldn't give up. Margaret approached, still trying to process everything that had happened. Principal Williams, I don't know how to thank you for what you've done for us. Margaret, it was Tommy who did it all. He had the courage to ask for help when it was needed. My grandson has always been special, but I think he's learned that sometimes we need to trust the right people. And how did you know I was the right person? Tommy and Margaret exchanged a glance and smiled. Because you listened to us, Margaret said. And because when we told you our story, you really cared, Tommy added. In the weeks that followed, life at the school changed completely. Margaret took on her new responsibilities with the same dedication as always, but now with the respect and recognition she deserved. Tommy remained the same studious and affectionate boy, but now with the security of knowing his future was guaranteed. Robert returned to his original school, but continued visiting Lincoln Elementary regularly. He had developed a special fondness for that community, especially for Tommy and Margaret. 3 months after Karen's removal, the school welcomed a new principal, chosen through a transparent and democratic process. All the staff who had been unjustly dismissed were reinstated, and those who had been hired improperly were guided to seek other opportunities through public job postings. Karen's niece, Melissa, who had been given the position through nepotism, surprisingly asked to stay at the school as a volunteer while studying for a civil service exam. She had been ashamed of her aunt's actions and wanted to prove she could earn her place through her own efforts. One Friday afternoon, Robert was visiting the school when he found Tommy reading a book under the same tree where they had first talked about courage. What are you reading? A book about people who changed the world by doing the right thing. And what do you think of those people? I think they're like you and me, regular people who decided not to give up when it mattered. Robert smiled, once again impressed by the boy's depth. Tommy, can I ask you something? Sure. If you could go back in time, would you do anything differently? Tommy thought for a moment. I think I'd hand over the notes sooner. The longer we wait to ask for help when we need it, the more people get hurt. That's a very important lesson. Principal Robert, can I tell you what I want to be when I grow up? What do you want to be? I want to be someone who helps kids like me, Kids who are scared but need to find the courage to do the right thing. I think you'll be really good at that. Why? Because you already know what it's like to be on the other side, and that makes all the difference. Margaret approached, finishing her workday. Now as a coordinator, she had more flexible hours and better working conditions. Serious talk going on here, huh? Grandma, I was telling Principal Robert that I want to help other kids when I grow up. My grandson has such a big heart, Margaret said proudly. He got that from someone very special, Robert replied. Principal, can I ask you a personal question? Of course, Margaret. Do you have children? I don't. Well, you should know that to me and Tommy, you're family. Always will be. Robert felt his eyes grow moist. Throughout his career, he had faced many difficult situations, but he had never been so deeply moved. You two are very special to me too. You've changed how I see my work. How so? You reminded me that behind every number, every statistic, every report, there are real people with real stories, and that our job, at its core, is about protecting and caring for those people. Tommy closed the book and looked at the two adults. Can I say something? Of course. I think everything that happened was to teach us that we're not alone in the world, that there's always someone willing to help, and always someone who needs our help. Margaret hugged her grandson. My little philosopher. It's not philosophy, Grandma. It's life. At that moment, Robert realized this experience hadn't just changed Tommy and Margaret's lives, it had changed his own too. He had rediscovered the true purpose of his work in education. 6 months later, Lincoln Elementary was completely transformed. Student performance had improved significantly. The work environment was more harmonious, and the community had developed a sense of unity that hadn't existed before. Tommy became a kind of leader among the students, always ready to help classmates facing difficulties. Margaret implemented a program where more experienced staff mentored the newer ones, creating an environment of collaboration and mutual learning. Robert, at his original school, began applying some of the lessons he had learned during his undercover investigation. He established direct communication channels with staff and students, created transparency committees, and implemented a whistleblower protection system. One Monday morning, nearly a year after the note incident, Robert found an envelope on his desk. The handwriting on the address looked familiar. Inside, he discovered a photo of Tommy and Margaret smiling, along with a letter. Principal Robert. My grandma helped me write this letter because I wanted it to be perfect. I've completed a year at school with the scholarship, and my grades are really good. My grandma loves working as a coordinator and says she's never felt so respected. But the most important thing is I learned a lesson I want to share with you. Courage isn't about not being afraid. Courage is doing the right thing even when you are scared. You taught me that when you accepted my note and decided to help us. Now I teach it to other boys and girls at school who sometimes need help but are afraid to ask. I hope you're doing well and that you keep helping other families like you helped ours. With love and gratitude, Tommy Jenkins Wilson. Robert smiled as he read the letter. Tommy had grown, but he still had the same wisdom and compassion that had impressed him from the very first day. That same afternoon, he decided to pay a surprise visit to the school. He wanted to see Tommy and Margaret for himself. He arrived during recess and immediately spotted Tommy in the yard, surrounded by a group of younger children. He seemed to be telling a story that had them all captivated. Robert quietly moved closer to listen. And then, Tommy was saying, the boy realized he wasn't alone, that there's always someone willing to help, but sometimes we need the courage to ask for it. A little girl about 7 raised her hand. Tommy, what if we ask for help and the person doesn't help? Then we ask someone else, and then another, until we find someone who really will. But how do we know who will help? Tommy thought for a moment. We know by the way they look at us, if they really see us, if they truly care. Robert felt his chest grow warm. Tommy was passing on the lessons they had learned together. Tommy, a familiar voice called, a familiar voice. Margaret was approaching, now wearing a different uniform that reflected her new position at the school. She looked more confident, more self-assured. "Grandma, Principal Robert came to visit us." Margaret looked where Tommy was pointing and beamed. "Principal? What a wonderful surprise." "Margaret, how are you?" "Very well, very happy. I never imagined I could feel so fulfilled at work. And you deserve every bit of that happiness." Tommy walked up and, to Robert's surprise, hugged him. "Thank you for coming. I got your letter. I was so proud. Principal Robert, want to see something?" "Of course." Tommy led him to a wall in the school hallway where a bulletin board displayed photos and writings from students. At the center was a picture of Tommy with Margaret, alongside a caption, "Courage is doing the right thing, even when you're afraid." Tommy Jenkins Wilson taught us that asking for help when we need it isn't weakness, it's wisdom, and that there are always good people willing to help those in need. Beneath the photo were dozens of notes from other students sharing their own stories of courage and how they had found help when they needed it. "This board was the new principal's idea," Margaret explained. "She said Tommy's story should inspire other children." "It's beautiful," said Robert, moved. "Principal," said Tommy, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you think our story can help kids at other schools too?" "Why do you ask that?" "Because sometimes I think there must be a lot of kids out there going through what I went through, and maybe they need to know they're not alone." Robert looked at Tommy with admiration. Even though he was still a child, he was already thinking about how he could help others in similar situations. "Tommy, I think you're right. And you know what? I'll talk to other principals about this. Maybe we can create a program where stories like yours are shared to inspire other kids." Tommy's eyes lit up. "Really?" "Absolutely. Your story has the power to change lives." Margaret placed a hand on her grandson's shoulder. "See, Tommy? I always said you were special. Grandma, we're special. Our story is special. But what makes it special is that it shows ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they care about each other." Robert was once again struck by Tommy's depth. The boy had matured but kept the same kindness and wisdom that defined him. "Tommy, I have a proposal for you." "What proposal?" "How about you come with me to visit other schools and tell your story? Of course, only if you want to and if your grandmother allows it." Tommy looked at Margaret, who nodded with a proud smile. "I'd love to, Principal Robert, but can I make a suggestion?" "Of course." "That my grandma comes too, because the story isn't just mine, it's ours." Margaret was moved by her grandson's words. "Tommy, I don't know if I could speak in front of so many people." "Grandma, you don't have to say much. You just have to be yourself. Because when people see you, they understand why I fought so hard to protect you." And so began a new chapter in their lives. Robert organized a program where Tommy and Margaret visited schools in the area, sharing their story and encouraging other students and staff to report injustices. The impact was remarkable. Within 6 months, over 15 cases of misconduct were reported and investigated. Staff who were being mistreated found the courage to speak up, and students who witnessed injustices learned that their voices mattered. Tommy became something of a celebrity in education circles, but he always stayed humble and focused on what truly mattered, helping others in need. At one of the talks, an 8-year-old girl approached him afterward. "Tommy, I have a situation like yours at my school, but I'm scared." "What are you scared of?" "That no one will believe me, that things will get worse." Tommy knelt to meet her at eye level. "Want to know a secret?" She nodded. "I was scared too when I wrote that note. But you know what helped me?" "What?" "Remembering it wasn't just about me. It was about my grandma, about justice, about doing the right thing. When you fight for something bigger than yourself, you find courage you didn't even know you had." The girl smiled timidly. "What if it doesn't work?" "Then we try again, but if we don't try, it definitely won't work." 10 days later, Robert got a call from the girl's school. She had found the courage to report a pattern of bullying that had been ignored by the administration. The investigation uncovered deeper issues, and several changes were made to protect students. Tommy changed another child's life. Robert said to Margaret during one of their visits. "Principal, sometimes I look at my grandson and can hardly believe he had the courage to do what he did. But then I remember courage is something you learn, and he learned because he had to. And now he's teaching others. That's the circle of life, isn't it? We receive help and then help others." 2 years after the initial incident, Tommy was 11 years old and had become an eloquent, mature teenager. Margaret, now 65, was preparing for a well-earned retirement, knowing she would leave the school in a much better state than she had found it. Robert had been promoted to Regional Superintendent of Education, largely due to the success of the program he developed based on his experience with Tommy and Margaret. On a fall afternoon, the three reunited at the school where it all began. The place had become almost unrecognizable. Colorful walls, well-kept gardens, an atmosphere of joy and mutual respect. "You know, this place changed my life just as much as it changed yours," Robert said. "How so?" Tommy asked. "Before meeting you, I saw my job as just administration, numbers, reports. You reminded me that education is about people, about care, about justice. And you reminded us that there's always someone willing to help when we need it," Margaret replied. Tommy, who had grown more thoughtful with age, stayed silent for a moment before speaking. "You know what I think is the most amazing part of all this?" "What?" the two adults asked. "That it started with something small, a note, a few words written by a scared kid. But when those words reached the right person, they turned into something much bigger." "That's true," Robert agreed. "The biggest changes sometimes start with the smallest gestures." "Principal Robert," Tommy said, "when I start high school next year, I want to keep helping kids who go through tough situations. Can I count on your guidance?" "Always, Tommy, always." Margaret looked at the two men in her life because that's how she saw Robert now, as family, and felt her heart overflowing with gratitude. "You know, I spent my whole life thinking I was just a janitor, someone unimportant. Grandma." "Let me finish, Tommy. You showed me that every honest job has dignity. That taking care of a school is as important as running a company. That raising a good kid is one of the most valuable things someone can do in this world." Robert felt his eyes grow damp. "Margaret, you've always been an extraordinary person. You just needed someone to recognize it. And now," Tommy said, "other people will recognize it too, because our story is helping change how people see staff, students, families like ours." It was true. The program they had started had expanded to other regions. Stories of courage and justice were inspiring changes in dozens of schools. When it was time to say goodbye that day, the three hugged like a family that had always supported each other. "Until next time," Robert said. "Principal," Tommy called. "Yes? Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. Tommy, you always had everything inside you. You just needed a chance to show it." And so, the story that began with a frightened boy handing a crumpled note to a stranger became a legacy of courage, justice, and compassion that would continue inspiring people for years to come. Tommy grew up to become an educator, dedicated to helping children in vulnerable situations. Margaret retired with dignity and began volunteering in adult literacy programs. Robert continued his work in education, always remembering that behind every statistic, there are human stories that deserve care and attention. And in a small school in Chicago, a mural continues to remind everyone who passes by that courage can come in the smallest gestures, and that when good people come together to do what's right, miracles can happen. The story of Tommy, Margaret, and Robert has become legend in the city's public school system, not because it was extraordinary in its events, but because it was extraordinary in its humanity. It showed that true education happens when we care for one another, when we protect the vulnerable, and when we have the courage to do the right thing even when it's hard. And it all started with a note, a small cry for help that landed in the right hands and turned into something far greater than anyone could have imagined. The end. What did you think of this story of courage and determination? Do you believe Tommy made the right choice by handing over that note? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one.